Now, the news for South Mississippi. WLOX News this week.
The Department of Justice investigation into the Robb Elementary School shooting, so tragic. Why did police wait so long to go in while a gunman was shooting children? Thanks for staying with us, everybody. What a heartbreaker. Mass shootings under the microscope just this week. A shooting at a medical center in Tulsa. That following that horrible shooting in Uvalde, Texas, where 19 children and 2 teachers were gunned down. Plenty of questions surrounding how police responded to the school shooting. Joining us, retired SWAT officer with the Tulsa, Oklahoma Police Department, Mark Sherwood. Mark, thanks so much for being with us here on the Mississippi coast.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. Thanks for it.
You know, inconceivably tragic. The scene so chaotic. Police under the pressure. We'll talk about kind of what police did and didn't do. But I want to start with one thing I found so disturbing is how we saw so many stories and the timelines change so many times, which just erodes public confidence.
Yeah, so a couple things to keep in mind, because I've been on those scenes before. There's a lot of chaos that's happening, a lot of information that's being relayed to you, and the officer's job immediately is to try to determine a couple things. You know, where are you going to set your outer perimeter, which is secure the building itself so that other potential people can't come in and become victims, and then how you set your inner perimeter based upon where the suspect is located within the building. Secondarily, if the information that was broadcast to the commanding officer was as follows, that the suspect is armed, barricaded, alone in a building or a room, that would be different as opposed to this information. The suspect is armed and barricaded, there's multiple victims, and there's victims and hostages in the room with the suspect. 2 different responses. In the former, the officer's job would be to secure the facility, perhaps develop evacuation routes, render aid to the people that need help immediately, and wait the suspect out.
Well, that was the problem, and I know where you're going. That wasn't the situation. We had parents outside screaming at police to go in. We had those that poor little girl who made those 911 calls from inside the classroom. How could there have been such a breakdown in communications?
Well, that is the question, because the police officers cannot go on what they're told by the parents outside because they don't know if that's factual or based upon a panic situation. And we don't know as well that if the information that was given to the 911 dispatcher was communicated eventually to the commander, because we have 3 different agencies there. You have the Border Patrol, you have the local officers and the county officers. And frankly, you don't know the communication techniques or styles or mechanisms they have in place. So there's a lot of confusion around this. And I too, like you, look at that time frame, and it optically looks terrible. But again, I don't know the information that was given to the persons at the scene at the time.
How the difficulty with so many entities and jurisdictions involved, the school district police, who appeared to be in charge for some reason, in my opinion. Uvalde police arrive on the scene, the sheriff's department's there, eventually state, and then when it came down to it, it was the border agents that crashed in. But I mean, isn't the protocol since Columbine, what am I missing? To blow down the door, break in the windows, do whatever you can to get inside and neutralize the shooter?
Yeah, the protocol is as follows, and most SWAT officers and most tactically sound and trained officers know this. If you have an active shooter and victims and hostages, as soon as you get enough people there, it could be 3, 4, or 5, whether you're outgunned or not, you got to figure out a way to get in there, reach the door. We know you're going to risk your life. That's what we signed on to do, and nobody likes it. I've been there before. You have to walk through fear, and you have to go right at that suspect to neutralize them as fast as possible.
Instead of waiting for a key. I mean, there's so many stories. People are so upset about this, wondering why, as children were dying, and many children were likely bleeding out, that they didn't breach the door. So now we have this Justice Department investigation. It could be political, I don't know, but what could come out of that?
Well, I think when we look at any investigation in a tragedy like this, there's always something to learn about responses, what should have been done, what could have been done. So we want to take it and learn from it so we can not repeat the same mistakes again. At the same time, there's a lot of information that's yet to come out. We have a lot of conjecture, a lot of stories, but I'm one, because I've been on there before. You want to kind of stay a little bit quiet on it until we get the actual facts, but not minimizing the parents being upset and even the public. I get it. I understand. You should be. There needs to be answers to these questions. So we just got to definitely get more information to determine what the officers were given at the scene at the time.
Let's talk about the killers. Columbine, Sandy Hook, Parkland, Uvalde, the Buffalo shooting in New York, which was horrible as well, at the grocery store, and so many other cases of mass shootings. There seem to be afterwards so many red flags that we see about these monsters. What can we do? Is it even possible in your mind to try to deal with these killers before it happens?
Well, I think we need to understand that evil is prevalent in our world, and you can't legislate evil or morality into the heart or out of the hearts of mankind. Evil's been around, and before the advent of guns. I mean, Cain killed Abel with a rock. So murderous spirits are around, and we've done a poor job. We removed God from schools and government and medicine and everywhere else, and they get violence in exchange. But when you look at the mental health issues, when we see these red flag warnings come up, we need to act and say something. There's got to be an overhaul in our mental health system as well, to not just dismiss this as idle or non-existent or non-meaningful threats, but they are, and act quicker on this. Because I understand in the Robb Elementary shooting, there was a lot of warning signs, but apparently no one took it serious or did anything about it.
You know, there are a lot of people who say, I'm uncomfortable with razor wire around schools and metal detectors and armed guards. But the fact is, these are soft targets, and these are our children. So, I mean, is it time to start, in your opinion, I don't want to talk about arming teachers because that's pretty controversial, but at least armed resource officers?
Yes, I was in Israel probably 20, 25 years ago, and I observed a school that was being protected and armed with an armed military personnel with a, clearly indicated assault rifle out there. And I asked the question, what is this, a prisoner of school? And I was asking because I was inquisitive. And he said to me through his broken English that you're not allowed to hurt our children. When you get our children, you get our future. So I think at this point in time, we know violence is everywhere, and soft targets, whether it be kids or adults, any of those are unacceptable. We got to prevent that. So we're at a place in time where we need to really consider the one-way in, kind of concept that is having visible security for at least an intimidation, at least a visual deterrent, to not become soft targets. In other words, become hard targets, because these bad guys like this, in my experience, they're looking to take as many people out as they can to go down in a blaze of glory and become famous. So we need to secure our facilities and quit making them famous from the media side, and really begin to not worry about the optics so much, but protect our future, which is our children.
Okay, and Mark, I hate to bring this up with about 30 seconds left, but everything's politicized. Now the debates over the Second Amendment, the debates over expanding gun control measures and laws, maybe raising the age from 18 to 21 to be able to buy these AR-15s, and the expanded magazines and everything else. You think we're going to actually, this is so horrible that we might see some bipartisan solutions?
Well, we can only hope we can see bipartisan solutions in anything, because right now there's such a dividing line. I don't think necessarily, guns and gun control is going to solve the problem of violence, but I think certainly some type of meeting of the minds to sit down and cooperate and come together, because we cannot operate as one nation under God, indivisible, if we're a nation above God and divisive. So I concur with you. We've got to sit down and do things together from this point forward.
Okay, retired SWAT officer with the Tulsa. We didn't even talk about the Tulsa shooting, and I feel bad about that. Mark Sherwood, who, by the way, is also a gubernatorial candidate in the state of Oklahoma. Thanks so much for being with us, Mark.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.